I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo. Good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green. And hello to those of you listening on the internet or Pacific stations, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantabulous co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And you have had the amazing good fortune to tune into For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in the way that it affects you. Your wealth, your health, your happiness, and the health and the happiness of the dogs and the cats and the wolves and the panthers and the cows and the bison and pretty much everybody and everything else, because, like it or not, all of us are wrapped up together on this miraculous little planet called Earth. And just how miraculous the Earth truly is becoming clearer and clearer as we explore more of the universe and discover more and more planets orbiting other suns. So far, we've discovered somewhere around 15,000 planets orbiting the far distant stars in the night sky. The combination of having a rocky planet with an atmosphere made up mostly of nitrogen and having enough elements like carbon and oxygen to support life, as well as orbiting within the habitable zone, the Goldilocks zone, where water can exist both as a solid and a liquid and a gas at the same time. That seems to be pretty unique in the universe. We also live in one of the most least radioactive places in the cosmos. We have the magnetic fields of the sun and the earth that protect us from the radiation that bathes the entire universe. And we have our ozone layer protecting us from ultraviolet radiation, and the entire atmosphere protects us from even more external radiation. The Earth is also radioactive internally, which can be a positive thing on a galactic scale. Radioactive isotopes like uranium and thorium are constantly emitting radiation that keeps the Earth's core molten, which provides us with plate tectonics, but we're largely protected from that radiation by the ground beneath our feet. So you, yes, you, the listener, are an incredibly improbable being resting on a fantastically unique planet, listening to our one-of-one show. You're incalculably lucky just to be here, and when you add the incredibly long odds against being lucky enough to hear an episode of For a Green Future, well, today we've got another excellent show for you. We're just going to chat for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we actually do not have a guest this week. So what we've decided to do is take a deeper dive at an important current topic. We're going to have a discussion about data centers and their environmental impact. After that, it'll be time to thank our wonderful patrons, without whom your luck would never have manifested at all. And then, Rebecca, it'll be your turn to talk to us. What do you have to talk about?
I am going to talk about pigeons.
Pigeons. Which variety? How many species of pigeon are there?
The ones in the cities, like your common pigeon, they're all descendants of the rock dove.
Okay. Sounds good. Well,
So they're kind of all the same species, but they interbreed with rock doves and feral pigeons, wild pigeons, and tame pigeons that all are good buddies.
In New York City, at least, they're called rats with wings. Does that have any scientific basis? Did you find out?
They eat garbage, which is a good thing actually, because if you have rats with wings, you don't get so many of the regular rats without the wings.
Oh, sure. That sounds good. We'll look forward to that, and then after that, it'll be ecological news from around the world. So we mentioned how we are largely protected from the radiation under the earth, but when there is oil and gas drilling or fracking, that radiation can get pumped up to the surface. Few of us realize just how much radiation and carbon is being pumped up from under the ground every minute of every day. We actually recently discovered that the Ohio Department of Natural Resources has an interactive map of all the oil and gas wells in the state. There's concentrations in places like Jefferson, Harrison, Belmont, and Monroe counties. Those are all on the eastern edge of Ohio. And it's pretty incredible just how many there are in those sections.
Yeah, Wood County had a little oil boom at some point, did it not? Like in the late 1800s?
Yes. Yeah, actually that led to a lot of grief.
That's how we got some of the fancy painted lady houses downtown by the courthouse.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in just a minute.
Okay.
In the zoomed out view of the state, it doesn't look like there are many wells, but if you start zooming in, you actually discover they're pretty common. In fact, it turns out there's a still producing natural gas well just a few blocks from our house in the middle of a residential neighborhood in the city of Bowling Green. And most of the time, we don't see the oil and gas infrastructures that the United States, depends on so heavily. The well just a few blocks from our house is inside a building, so we would have no way of knowing it was there without this resource. Yeah, and the city of Bowling Green does have a lot of very cool old houses, and they mostly were built back at a time when Bowling Green was actually one of the largest oil and gas producing places in the world. There's a mural on the wall in Bowling Green's county building, Wood County building, that shows dozens of huge oil wells just spewing smoke and gases into the air. That mural is dated 1904, and of course the CO2 that was put into the atmosphere way back then is part of the excess CO2 causing global warming today.
So it's still around then?
The mural is.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the CO2, yes, because the mechanisms don't absorb CO2, very efficiently. It was actually discovered, the oil was discovered in 1885, a little later. And by 1886, there was a mad rush all around the county. It was practically an orgy of oil exploitation. And back then, there was no such thing as regulation or environmental laws to slow the extraction down. So thousands and thousands of private wells were dug in just a few years. By 1896, 10 years after the discovery, there were 5,500 wells scattered around Wood County, and it was the #1 place for oil production in the world.
Wow.
So it's changed a little bit since then. And as you can imagine, the environmental destruction caused by all that selfish oil development was incredible. Writers at the time described lakes of oil. Birds would think they were made of water. They would land on the lakes of oil and then just sink because oil is less dense than water.
Right.
Oil would spray from the wells, literally coating the houses in buildings, in villages or towns. And there were frequent fires and other disasters.
I just bet there were.
Boom towns like Jerry City and North Baltimore would spring up, be partially burnt down, and then get built back up again. There was one especially notable disaster that occurred in the tiny little town of Signet. An oil well was being drilled using a steam engine. When the drill struck oil, it came gushing out of the well, and the fire in the steam engine boiler ignited it, causing the whole area to burst into flame.
Yeah,
that's normal.
Right, yeah. It's everyday stuff.
But this time, there was a wagon loaded with nitroglycerin parked nearby.
Oh, no.
A common material in the drilling process.
This isn't going to be a happy story, is it?
No.
Darn it.
The wagon also caught fire, and the nitroglycerin exploded, leveling half the town and killing many people. But back then, the human life was, expendable. Yeah. All that was just the cost of doing business. The damage to the environment and the loss of the oil field workers were just a price that you had to pay in order to have the huge, beautiful houses that were being built in Bowling Green. And our ornate county building, covered in marble murals and beautiful tiles arranged in artistic patterns, in a way, people died for it. So it's good to remember. We have to wonder if we had told the people back then how they would react if they knew the long-term result of all their efforts would be the planet Earth becoming uninhabitable, potentially uninhabitable. Actually, the first predictions that CO2 increases would warm the Earth were made right around the peak of Bowling Green's oil fuel prosperity.
Wow.
Svante Arrhenius published a paper in 1896 that predicted doubling the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere would cause the Earth to warm by 5 or 6 degrees Celsius. He wasn't far off, but if the trends and data we've seen over the past 100 years are any indication, there's actually maybe not a ceiling in sight. It's also never been about just CO2 production. The Earth itself, the whole big ecosystem, produces and consumes a lot of CO2. But it was around this area, the Industrial Revolution, expanding industry and trade, that we humans started overproducing the amount of CO2 that the whole system could take. But the people of Wood County were spared the existential anxiety of dealing with the question of global warming, because as quickly as it started, the oil industry collapsed. We didn't know as much about geology at that time. The oil drillers didn't realize they were depressurizing the entire oil field.
Oops.
Yeah, without pressure, it's just too much work to pump the oil up from thousands of feet under the ground for large scale profit anyways. By 1915, oil production in Ohio was in free fall, and by about 1920, it was pretty much done. Our big, beautiful home in Bowling Green, with all its wood trim and pocket doors, was built right at the end of the oil boom around 1920. And there's still about 200 active oil wells around Wood County, but they produce a tiny fraction of the oil that was once mined here, and just a decibel point on the scale of global measurements.
I was just realizing you have a door with a door on either side of it.
Yes.
That's odd. I've never seen that feature before in an old house.
Yeah, that was for servants, so that you could segregate whoever was, serving your meals or whatever even more than strictly necessary.
All right.
And many of the tiny towns in this county, which once boasted rich people and servants and grand hotels and saloons, and all the additional social infrastructure needed to entertain the predominantly male oil prospectors. All those little towns now struggle to maintain any sort of infrastructure or commerce. Their families might have spent generations in the same local area, just a few years short of claiming hereditary wealth. And that boom-bust cycle is inevitable whenever you have an extractive industry. There's almost every state in the United States has had one or more big runs: gold, oil, bison, land. And of course, it must be said that the early years of US expansionism came expressly at the ruin of the indigenous peoples and the environment. There's no resource that is mined or pumped out of the ground that's infinite. Eventually you run out and then the whole system collapses. A green future requires an understanding of that basic physical principle. A sustainable ecology is one that's built on energy and resources that are naturally renewable. Solar and wind power, for example, will never run out. Or I suppose if it does, we'll
have
be
bigger problems.
way too far gone.
There's no sun or wind anymore. That's bad.
We can get all the resources we need to do things like feed ourselves and our animals, clothe ourselves, and shelter ourselves out of plants that we grow sustainably rather than oil or natural gas that we pump out of the ground. And that's well known. The problem right now isn't even the production of what we need, it's the distribution. A lot of people made a lot of money during the oil boom days in Ohio and elsewhere, but we have to remember that money is not actually a real thing. Money, viewed objectively, is an imaginary commodity whose value fluctuates without any true connection to reality.
Technically, it's really just pieces of paper.
Yeah, even beyond that, most of the time it's decimals in a computer.
Right.
There's actually another boom going on right now, directly related to decimals in a computer, and reminiscent of the oil boom that happened in Bowling Green back in the late 1800s. Right now, billions and billions of dollars are being spent to build huge new data centers.
Yeah, we passed one on the way here from Toledo.
Yeah, that one's north of Bowling Green, south of Perrysburg. It's a month or 3 away from completion. It's been going for almost a year now, I would say. And, there's a couple differences and a couple similarities between data centers, the concept of them, and the oil booms or the gold rushes back in the day. Data centers aren't geographically located. Anyone could buy into them right now with the stock market or other futures trading kind of thing. And they only present abstract value rather than a tangible asset. When you get your solid gold nugget in your hand, that's a real, you worked for that. But when you erect a server farm full of hundreds of red lights in a row, that doesn't feel as good. And but there's, I think, more similarities to data centers and gold rushes than differences. The rich are going to get richer.
Yes, they are.
That's for sure. Back in the day, if you had money, you could hire people to do your oil drilling for you instead of speculating yourself. And this is no different. If you have $1 billion, you can just make a server farm instead of stumbling across a wild growing one. There's also lots of speculation and false promises going on right now. We're being told, the public especially, is being told that this is the future and we should get behind it because it'll revolutionize every industry.
It's going to be a short future. Because water, we're gonna run out fast.
There's no direct use yet for these huge data centers, which is why everybody's trying to push to get them in now before the use can be discovered. Right now, data centers are also being used as a tool for oppression, similar to the gold rush back in the day, both in terms of the data centers primarily being built on land that is poorer or more rural, not necessarily the same thing, but often. And simultaneously, if these specific tech ventures were to fail, the infrastructure is there to pivot seamlessly into a dystopian surveillance state.
I guess so, yeah.
The data centers become an overarching AI, like Big Brother. And one notable thing about, one huge difference about data centers and gold rushes or oil rushes, the poor can never be richer. Back in the day, you could actually find a gold nugget or 3 or
Right.
dozens,
Right.
or you could find an oil well on the land that you purchased. But now this is not an opportunity. This is not an investment one single person can make into the future. It's not for us, the common person. It's just for them to create new tools to get rid of us.
It's not going to be like the Beverly Hillbillies, you know. We end up, moving to Hollywood and having our own cement pond.
Yeah, if only.
Yeah.
I don't think data centers can support any life of any kind, actually.
Yeah.
Well, digital life. Maybe if we create real, general artificial intelligence, maybe then it'll be good. The rumors are that they've already done that, actually, in some secret, secluded lab somewhere. I'm not sure how realistic that is. And that concludes our very official Green Future Report on data centers. What did you think? You can let us know by sending a text to 419-973-5841 or an email to joe@joedemare for agreenfuture.org, or you can find us on social media. Something we're not disappointed in the future, we're actually very hopeful about, are our patrons. These are people who deserve all praise, and they became patrons by going to patreon.com, patreon.com. They searched for a green future. They scrolled through the membership levels, the options, or chose their own, created their own, and signed up. And now a little bit comes out of their accounts every month that comes over to us. And that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air and give you
Very true.
special reports about data centers and other things. Thank you to our patrons. We hope to see you join their ranks. Well, Rebecca, it's time to talk about rats with wings.
All right. Yeah, so I'm house sitting this week in somebody's little apartment downtown, and when I look out my window, I can see birds flying by quite a bit, actually. And I don't know, initially I thought it maybe was hawks nesting in the eaves of the building or something, but across the alleyway, there's a rooftop where there are a whole bunch of pigeons living. So that's why I thought of pigeons. So they're the Columbidae family, basically, which is all pigeons and doves. The difference is basically just that doves are smaller, and the ancestor of all of the domestic pigeons are rock doves, which there's like a famous photo, there's a bunch of photos around of, making fun of pigeons because their nests, they tend to make nests by laying 2 eggs in the concrete and, putting this sort of interesting Japanese character looking configuration of like 3 pieces of straw.
Yes.
That's actually because rock doves mostly, like, they lay their eggs in little sort of crags and cliffs, and the crag just naturally holds them in place.
So it's an instinct.
Yeah.
They're not used to flat rocks.
Right, yeah. they're not actually dumb as dirt like people imagine. Although they've been on a whole journey, like my one Hood Nature guy that I like to watch on YouTube, he points out that actually all pigeons were once domesticated. So if you see a pigeon, it's feral, basically. Like, we use them for food, for communication, a lot of stuff, and then we were just done with them, so we just kind of let them loose, and maybe that's why they are nesting in our cities now, basically. They have very strong flight abilities, apparently. They have very muscular wings, and they can maneuver a lot. So that accounts for how they, use them to send messages, including, they were directly responsible during, World War I for saving lives.
Right, yeah.
People would be trapped behind enemy's lines somewhere, they'd send a pigeon, and then somebody would come rescue them. So, there's a direct, they were literally lifesavers, demonstrable specific cases of saving lives.
And was that a specific variety, or was it just, could you train any old pigeon to do that?
I don't know. I gotta think that we use rock doves because they're easier to work with than other pigeons. But yeah, there's this, in the Toledo Zoo, they got this Victoria crowned pigeon, which looks like a fat little peacock. It's amazing. They can be like all colors and patterns and things. They eat seeds and fruit. And your French fries.
Yeah.
But mostly seeds and fruit. Then they also feed crop milk to their offspring. Crop milk being a disgusting curd-like nutritious fluid produced by pigeons, doves, and flamingos and male emperor penguins, actually. And if you don't like that, let's remember to never cover what koalas feed their babies. It's even worse. But yeah. So yeah, they're interesting little critters. I don't know. They're described as being drab, the city kind. But if you look at a whole crowd of them, you can see that they're really all a little different. Like they'll be most of that gray or grayish brown color, and then most of them have sort of like little patches of iridescent pink and green and pinkish purple on them.
Yeah.
Like they have actually a very elegant old money look, which is sort of
the kerchief.
Yeah. They're really a lot prettier than you realize at first. But yeah, some of the benefits that they do for the environment is that they help sustain the urban food web, which sustaining a food web is a nice euphemism for eating and being eaten and also going to the bathroom. And then eventually dying and rotting. So yeah, I guess food. We used to talk about the food chain, when I was younger, and it was, well, this bacteria gets eaten by this, and it gets eaten by something bigger, and all the way up to the apex predator. A food web is just kind of a bunch of interconnected chains.
Yeah.
Like there's more lateral, they're dipping into other people's food chains, and you got monkeys that sort of, or you got animals who eat each other, depending on which one is bigger.
Right. Yeah.
Or animals who eat each other's young.
And you can't classify it as a predator only if that happens.
Right, yeah. So interesting things like that happen. So yeah, that's a food web. And so it's kind of a bunch of tangled up food chains. And of course, some animals aren't eaten at all. They just sort of die and rot. So there's that.
It's us.
Yeah.
More or less.
There we go. Yes, eventually. But yeah, they're also seed dispersers, obviously. They'll eat berry seeds and spread them around. So you don't have a big clump in one place using up all the resources that the trees need. And they're also garbage collectors / recyclers.
Collectors and
Yes.
recyclers. That's a good.
So they actually, they're working hard to keep your city clean. They are. And also they enrich soil fertility, which
Of course.
is another euphemism for they go potty a lot on things randomly. They support birds of prey also, which is
Support.
yes. Not really
Bodily.
voluntarily, but things eat them like hawks and falcons. Okay. But yeah, they also do weed suppression and insect regulation. Like they eat thistles a lot in the wild.
Thistles.
Yeah, they're big thistle eaters.
Thistle seeds or plants? Must be seeds.
Seeds, yeah. They eat thistle. So yeah, they're helping to keep weeds and including invasives out of your city, which is nice. Drawbacks. Well, pigeon poop. Nobody likes pigeon poop.
But it's good. It does stuff for the soil.
It
How could it be
does.
bad?
Yeah. Well, it's not good for your infrastructure in a lot of ways. Building, sculpture, that kind of thing. Also, it can clog drains a lot. Clog drains, clog up gutters, that kind of thing. Make a big mess. They do compete with native wildlife to a degree, and they attract secondary pests. They harbor fungal and bacterial pathogens, many of which are fairly serious and can spread to people and other animals. So, yeah, specifically they tend to compete with seabirds for nesting sites. Also, they've been breeding with wild rock doves so much that you kind of don't see wild rock doves anymore. Most of them are hybrids. So, yeah, that's a slight problem. In the country, they can eat crops, eat the seed once it's put in the ground, and also contaminate grain. by nesting in your barn or whatever. And and they can go after other animals in the area.
Oh, sure. Cats or something.
Yeah. So, they're a mixed bag. Basically, they're not one of our more serious environmental problems today.
No.
There's ways to deter them, put up bird spikes and chicken wire. Yeah, you can put up chicken wire over things to keep. So, and there are ways, people also put out pigeon birth control, apparently, to keep them from getting out of hand. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel like pigeons are the quintessential bird if you're in any kind of urban environment, like even more than a seagull, right? You see pigeons around everywhere.
Yeah, India has a big campaign right now to get people to stop feeding them, apparently.
Sure, yeah.
Because there's just too many around, apparently. So, they're a mixed bag, but, basically, they're doing all right. They're adapting to our world. They're sort of the roommate that is always in the bathroom, but they can make a really great lasagna. So their qualities sort of even out. It would be my perception of things.
All right. Thank you, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
Last year, our anonymous roving reporter attended a seminar on data centers in Waterville, Ohio, and he talked with a data center developer who literally laughed at the idea of putting wind or solar generation on data center campuses. That means that in order to power these new campuses, we have to continue environmentally destructive practices like fracking and uranium mining, just to satisfy these contemptuous elites. I mean, they are researching things to do with their fancy new infrastructure. Most people don't realize that one of the main things data centers are currently doing is literally making money. That is, they're mining cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Bitcoin and all cryptocurrencies are simply money that's issued by a corporation or an organization rather than a nation. The corporations that start a cryptocurrency set the rules for how it's created. Bitcoin, the first and largest of the cryptocurrencies, is mined by solving increasingly difficult mathematical equations. That's why you need computers to mine Bitcoin. Once you've solved the equations, you get a Bitcoin in your computer, and then you can trade it for other kinds of money that were created by governments, like the dollar or euro. There's no intrinsic value to Bitcoin. It just trades for whatever price other people are willing to pay for it. An interesting aspect to Bitcoin in particular, and probably the reason it's persisted as the flagship cryptocurrency, it has a limited number of coins that it will ever issue. The mathematical equations that let you mine a Bitcoin have only 21 million solutions. The early Bitcoins had equations that were simple enough that they could be solved by a home computer in a couple hours. 20 of the 21 million Bitcoins have been mined. The last billion Bitcoins have equations that are so fiendishly complicated that you need a data center running 24/7 for months or years to solve them. What will happen when the 21st millionth Bitcoin has been mined and there are no more to be created? It's possible that at that point, Bitcoin will lose all its value and be worth nothing. But on the other hand, it has become very valuable to criminal enterprises and other untraceable transactions around the world. Bitcoin has become the currency used by drug dealers, smugglers, and mercenaries. The latest twist on Bitcoin is that people are now dealing in fractions of a single Bitcoin. That's allowed the currency to be used in many more transactions than the limited number of 20 million would have allowed. Since a Bitcoin is an imaginary object, it can be divided into an infinite number of pieces. So there's actually no limit to how many Bitcoin there are. There's other cryptocurrencies that also require data center level computing. But while the cryptocurrencies themselves are imaginary, the environmental damage that the data centers are doing is very, very real. There's a number of bills going through the Ohio State Legislature and other legislatures around the country and around the world, which are focused on preventing data centers from raising utility costs for regular customers. There's no question that data centers are causing rising rates. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, Ohio's electricity rates have gone up around 30% in the last 10 years and 5% in the last year alone. And a large part of that is because of data centers. We've been watching testimony on Ohio House Bill 970, which would cause a separate utility rate for data centers, charging them more in order to prevent them from raising the costs for everyone. But this is folly. The reason is, as we just said, these data centers are literally making more money. So any increase in financial expenses can be met by just mining more Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, or renting out the space that already exists. That's one reason these data center developers seem to have an infinite supply of money. They're buying out homes and farms at 10 times the market value. It's because they effectively do have an infinite amount of money. Whenever they need more, they just run their computers longer and create more cryptocurrency to sell for quote-unquote real currency. But from an ecological standpoint, those of us that do still have some connection to the real world and an understanding of physical consequences, we've got to evaluate data centers based not on money, but on their real physical impact on things like water, air, and land. It's difficult to do this, extremely difficult, because data centers shroud their activities in secrecy. They force everyone involved to sign NDAs, so even government officials aren't allowed to talk about how much water or electricity a data center uses. So almost all the numbers surrounding data centers are based on estimates and guesses. We used an article in Science Direct that was published on January 9th, 2026 with the title, "The Carbon and Water Footprint of Data Centers and What This Could Mean for Artificial Intelligence." One of the biggest concerns with data centers is their impact on water. They impact water in many ways. The most obvious is water being used for cooling, but cooling is only a fraction of the total water use. 2/3 of the water usage is what's called indirect. According to a 2023 study done by the International Energy Agency, about 150 billion gallons of water were used for data centers. Only about 40 billion gallons of that total were used to directly cool data centers. The remainder was used to cool power plants that were generating the electricity used to run the data centers. But to illustrate just how hard it is to pin down these numbers, while the IEA estimated 150 billion gallons being used in 2023, worldwide, a study done by the Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory that same year estimated 240 billion gallons in the US alone. Given that a single medium-sized data center can use 5 million gallons a day, the bigger number seems more likely. Whenever water is used to cool any industrial process, such as data centers or power generation or anything, it picks up pollutants. In the case of data centers, it picks up PFAS, metals, chemicals used to prevent the growth of algae, mold, and bacteria, and other chemicals used to prevent corrosion in the facilities. And the sheer volume of this water can overwhelm municipal wastewater treatment plants. Often the water is being discharged directly into rivers and streams, and in addition to the chemical pollution, this is hot water that's dumped indirectly into the waterways. This increases the rate of eutrophication, encouraging the growth of algae and bacteria that can foul waterways. Another way that data centers impact water is during construction. The Meta data center that's being built in Wood County has had a huge impact on the wells of the properties surrounding it. Homeowners are reporting that the water coming out of their wells has turned to sludge, and that's not an uncommon story. The site preparation often includes dewatering, which requires the water table in the whole region to be lowered. And once a data center is built and the huge areas have been paved over, those prevent groundwater recharge. Instead of soaking into the ground, rain just runs off the parking lot and roofs and then gets dumped into local streams and waterways. In places like Utah that have a very dry climate, this dumping threatens the existing limited water resources. A recently proposed data center would dump 250,000 gallons of contaminated water into the Great Salt Lake every single day. And Utah is also the proposed site for a hyper scale data center called the Stratos Project. That data center would use 9 gigawatts of electricity 24 hours a day, every day of the year. That is double the current electricity usage of the entire state of Utah. Looking at power generation leads us directly to the impacts on air. Most data centers now are proposing to generate their own electricity, and the most common means of doing that are natural gas-powered turbines. The Meta data center in Wood County will be using 300 megawatts of generation. That's roughly 1/3 the amount produced by a nuclear power plant. According to their application for the generators, this will put about 20 million tons of CO2 into the atmosphere every year. Some of the tech bro billionaires that are building these data centers have argued that we need them for the artificial intelligence that will solve problems like global warming. But this is ridiculous when you look at how much greenhouse gas is being put into the air by the data centers themselves. Again, we see official estimates that are ridiculously low. The IEA estimates only 182 million tons a year. But if a moderately sized data center like the Meta data center in Wood County does 20 million tons, there's no way the global total is only 180 million. The Allianz Trade think tank estimates 315 million tons of CO2 worldwide yearly, but the true number is probably in the billions. In addition to CO2, the gas plants powering data centers also produce microsoot, or fine particulate matter. A study done by Harvard's Michael Cork estimated that the air pollution, especially particulate matter from a single data center in Loudoun County, Virginia. A study done by Harvard's Michael Cork estimated that the air pollution, especially particulate matter, from a single data center in Loudoun County, Virginia, could cause between $53 million and $99 million a year in health costs. Especially vulnerable are young children with asthma. Those costs include increased emergency room visits, increased costs of medications used to treat respiratory diseases, doctor visits, and an estimated 3 to 6 additional premature deaths per year. These are the damages attributed to a single data center in that county, the Vantage data center. It uses on-site gas and diesel turbines for power, just like the one being built in Wood County. And actually, the one in Loudoun County is smaller in size. Gas and diesel generators also create nitrous oxides. Those contribute to acid rain. The EPA this past week exempted data center emissions from acid rain rules. The EPA argues that because the data centers are generating the power for their own use, they shouldn't have to follow the regulations that utility companies do. That's just another example of Trump's Environmental Protection Agency directly advocating for environmental destruction. Finally, we need to look at the impact of the data centers on the Earth itself. The size of data centers are increasing exponentially. Most data centers in the state of Ohio are located in and around the city of Columbus. Those were, on average, roughly the size of a warehouse. And so the data centers were plugged into residential neighborhoods. But increasingly, data centers are being built on dedicated campuses. The data center in Wood County is taking up about 1,000 acres, which was prime farmland. But with all the buildings and landscaping, It never will be again. The Stratos data center that we mentioned earlier in Utah was originally planned to take up 40,000 acres. Because of public pushback, that's been scaled back to only 20,000 acres. And Meta is planning another data center in Louisiana that will have a 4,000 acre campus. That data center is notable because it's going to use 5 gigawatts of power alone. That's as much as 5 nuclear power plants. At the very time, our society should be putting every resource into switching to a carbon-free economy and saving the world, these data centers are creating incredible levels of greenhouse gas emissions, again, largely to create nothing. The estimates are that cryptocurrency mining uses about the same amount of energy as AI. We're told that we have to have these hyperscale data centers in order to have AI, but that's simply false. That the estimates are that the US has somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 data centers currently. China has literally 1/10 as many data centers, but their AI platform DeepSeek only requires a tiny fraction of the computing power. Chinese internet and AI seem superior to the US with just 1/10 of the number of data centers. And actually, data centers also threaten the stability of the entire electrical grid. According to a YouTube story by TV channel NBC4 in Washington, D.C. on July 25th, a single data center in Loudoun County, Virginia had a transmission line failure. This caused the data center to pull itself off the grid and switch to its emergency backup diesel generators. But that sudden drop in load destabilized the entire electrical grid, covering half the US. From Chicago to New York City, all the way down to Florida, lights flickered as the grid suffered voltage surges and drops and resurges. The instability lasted about 10 minutes, and the grid was able to rebalance itself. But grid collapse was not impossible. If the data center had been larger, or if multiple data centers went offline at the same time, there could have been a disaster that affected millions of people. While a few of these data centers are reaching out to renewable energy sources, most are not. They're signing power agreements with existing fossil fuel or even nuclear sources. So, to sum up our report on data centers, they are polluting our air and water, ruining our land, avoiding consequences and regulations with impunity, and in return are giving us absolutely, literally nothing. And now it's time for Ecological News. For our first story, we have some pretty good news. The Alliance for the Wild Rockies on their website on July 24th posted a story entitled Federal District Court Denies Request to Pause Yellowstone Buys in Lawsuit. So the Alliance for the Wild Rockies and the Council on Wildlife and Fish are both suing the federal government in court over their policies regarding the Yellowstone bison and the management of bison. We, of course, have been reporting on this story for many years, and on July 1st, the two organizations filed their first court brief, basically pointing out all the flaws in the government's bison policy. The government had asked the court for an indefinite pause on the lawsuit while they, quote, conduct more analysis. The court thankfully disagreed. The court pointed out that the suit alleges the current policy is harming the bison and harming the public interest, so pausing the lawsuit while studies are done means allowing the harm to continue without any modification. The bison management plan that's in place now was created back in the 1990s. Its sole focus was to prevent the spread of brucellosis from wild bison to domestic cattle that were grazing on the national forest lands around Yellowstone Park. More than a quarter century of scientific studies since then have proven that a bison has never transmitted brucellosis to domestic cattle. In fact, one source of brucellosis transmission to domestic cattle is the elk population, which is not regulated at all and which is actually encouraged in feeding in these areas by the government because they like to provide hunters with game to shoot. And Perhaps most importantly, in terms of the lawsuit, it's been a quarter century following the practice of killing all the bison that test positive for brucellosis that are captured at the park. 25 years of that practice has not changed the percentage of brucellosis found in the wild Yellowstone bison population at all. In other words, killing bison that have the antibodies against brucellosis just doesn't work as a method of reducing brucellosis in the bison population. This makes perfect sense, since having the antibodies just means you've been exposed to a disease, not that you currently have an infection. So this court victory is great news for the bison. Let's hope the lawsuit finally manages to put some sanity and some science in the way as the federal government manages the last wild herd of bison in the United States of America. For our next story, we're off to Europe. The Associated Press on July 24th reported, quote, "More than 200,000 people flee raging wildfires in France and Spain, some escaping by boat." The fires in question are burning in southwest France and central Spain. Over 140,000 residents of one French town and 60,000 residents of another town in Spain were forced to flee their homes by a rapidly spreading wildfire. These wildfires are being exacerbated by unprecedented drought and high temperatures. All over Europe, rivers are running dry. Nuclear power plants are being shut down because they have no cooling water, and fires are threatening major cities. As we've reported before, Canada is also experiencing much larger and hotter wildfires than normal. So far this year, the number of Canadian wildfires is 25% above the 10-year average. Many Indigenous communities of the far north have had to flee their homes. Some communities have been completely wiped out, and the Indigenous people who lived there could just watch helplessly from boats as their home burned to the ground. There's no question that the severity and number of these fires are being caused by global warming. Our third story is one that has both political and ecological ramifications. Associated Press, again on July 24th, reported, quote, "Trump administration admits grants for clean energy were canceled based on politics." The Trump administration is being sued because $7.6 billion in federal grants that were supposed to fund about 300 clean energy projects across 16 states were canceled by the Trump administration. At the time, Energy Secretary Chris Wright claimed that the projects were being canceled because renewable energy is somehow a left-wing conspiracy. The administration has focused all its energy on increasing the amount of fossil fuels being burned and trying to jumpstart the dying nuclear power industry. However, the Trump administration did not cancel clean energy projects and states that voted for Trump in the 2024 election. The name of the case is Thakur versus Trump, and in court documents that were filed last week, the Trump administration has admitted the real reason they canceled those projects were because they were going to benefit states that had voted for Kamala Harris in the presidential election. This should be blatantly illegal. The process of winning a competitive federal grant is supposed to be blind to political affiliation. It's very difficult to win a federal grant. Projects have to provide detailed budgets and plans. There's impartial panels that judge the grant applications without knowing the location or identity of the applicant. And that's all goes to ensure that only the best projects with the greatest chance of success actually get funded. Let's hope that admitting this political bias will lead to the administration losing their lawsuit and restore that clean energy funding for the country. Now it's off to sunny Florida for a rather distressing story. News 6 WKMG in Florida filed a report on July 30th titled, "Florida reports 17 leprosy cases so far this year. Doctors warn against handling armadillos." Yes, leprosy, the disease of ancient medieval times, is making a surge in the state of Florida. Also called Hansen's disease, it appears most of the cases are the result of humans interacting with armadillos. About 5% of the armadillo carries leprosy. This is not a natural disease for armadillos to carry. Humans infected armadillos in a lab in Texas back in 1971. Researchers were looking for an animal they could infect with leprosy so they could test out different treatments. There was a storm, and infected armadillos escaped into the wild. Leprosy has been spreading in the armadillo population ever since. Some of the victims in Florida handled armadillos directly, but some of them just worked the soil in places where armadillos had been digging. Leprosy is considered a curable disease now, but it often goes undiagnosed since it's so rare. That allows the disease to progress. If you're worried, you should look for red swatches to appear on their skin. The definitive symptom is often a loss of sensation, since the leprosy bacteria likes to travel up the nerves deeper into the body. While most of the news stories around this are all too happy to blame the armadillos, none of them are mentioning the fact that we humans are responsible for the situation in the first place. For our final story, we'll come back here to Ohio. From Cleveland.com on July 29th, Ohio Supreme Court case to decide if residents get any say on data centers in their backyard. A company called EdgeConneX made a deal with the city officials in Asheville, Ohio, to construct a data center. They promised the city $115 million to use as they wanted. But then attorneys for the corporation sent an email to the city officials instructing them to declare an emergency and pass the agreement through city council. Declaring an emergency prevents the law from being overturned by a public vote. The company also instructed the officials to hold the first, second, and third readings of the agreement at the same city council meeting. That would prevent the public from having any kind of chance to look at the agreement or make any comments before the whole thing became law. The residents of Asheville were incensed, and they gathered enough petition signatures to put the question on the ballot as a referendum. However, the fiscal officer of the city of Asheville rejected their referendum petition. One of the questions the Ohio Supreme Court has to decide is whether or not the fiscal officer has any authority to do that. It sure seems they do not. The proposed campus for the data center would take up 200 acres and require 800 megawatts of natural gas generation. The Supreme Court's decision hinges on the question of whether or not agreeing to host a data center actually is an emergency. By law, actions taken under the emergency clause have to be, quote, for the preservation of public peace, health, and safety. Given that data centers threaten all those things, it would sure seem that a law forcing the city to agree to a data center would not be considered an emergency. The Ohio Supreme Court has said it will decide before August 5th. That's the deadline for putting a referendum on the ballot in the November election. Residents of Asheville are very clear they would rather pay for improvements to things like water and sewer lines themselves rather than accept $115 million from a corporation that wants to burn in their city with a data center. Well, that's it for our show. Thanks so much for listening. If you have any comments or even questions, you can give us a text at 419-973-5841, an email at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org, or you can find us on social media. We'll be back next week. This is Joe DeMare, signing off.
I don't want no oil, spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No